He was promising fortunes, endless fortunes. A railway, he said. Now it was about to conquer land. George Hudson, known as the Railway King. By 1845, the British Parliament received over 1,200 proposals for new railway lines. But beneath the noise of engines and excitement, cracks began to appear. Then came the turning point. Confidence shattered. But here's where the story takes its strange twist. Imagine a map of Britain in the 1840s. Quiet farmlands, cobblestone towns, horse-drawn carriages rolling lazily along muddy roads. Then, like veins of iron cutting through green hills and fog, something new begins to spread: the railway. But this isn't a story about invention. It's a story about obsession, about how a nation once defined by prudence and progress became consumed by greed, all for the promise of speed. In the spring of 1843, a man in a fine hat stood before a crowded tavern in London, a glass of ale in one hand, a railway prospectus in the other. He was promising fortunes, endless fortunes. A railway, he said, would soon connect every village, every mine, every corner of the empire. And for those who invested early, the returns would be beyond imagination. People believed him, from the coal mines of Wales to the cotton mills of Manchester. Railway fever spread faster than the engines themselves. Everyone wanted in. Clerks, widows, farmers, even servants. They all pooled their savings, bought shares, and dreamed of wealth. It wasn't just the elite this time, it was the masses. The 1840s were an age of optimism. The Industrial Revolution had transformed Britain into the workshop of the world. Steam power had conquered rivers, ships, and factories. Now it was about to conquer land. Railways symbolized modernity, power, and the future itself. By day, the newspapers printed glowing headlines: "The New Age of Iron." By night, investors gathered in pubs and parlors, studying railway maps under candlelight, drawing imaginary lines across the countryside, each line a potential gold mine. Companies sprang up by the hundreds. Some were backed by real engineers, real routes, and real demand. But many more existed only on paper. Schemes with grand names like the Great Northern Extension or the London to Bristol Direct. In truth, they had no rails, no locomotives, not even land rights. All they had was confidence, and confidence was contagious. The mania was in full swing. Shares that once sold for a few pounds were suddenly worth hundreds. Newspapers reported tales of clerks who became gentlemen overnight, of small-town shopkeepers turning into lords of iron. The more people saw others grow rich, the more desperate they became to join in. There was one man who saw it all coming: George Hudson, known as the Railway King. A draper's apprentice turned industrial magnate, Hudson became the symbol of railway success. He built networks, bought companies, and controlled vast fortunes. People adored him. He seemed unstoppable, the living embodiment of the railway dream. But Hudson wasn't the only one playing the game. Across the country, a frenzy of speculation drove land prices sky high. Farmers demanded enormous sums for their fields. Surveyors and lawyers grew rich on fees alone. Engineers couldn't draw maps fast enough.
I'll take 20 at 3/4.
By 1845, the British Parliament received over 1,200 proposals for new railway lines. The number was staggering. Even Queen Victoria's government couldn't keep up with the madness. Politicians themselves were buying shares, pushing through bills that would benefit their own investments. It was a golden age, or so it seemed. Ordinary citizens, swept up in dreams of progress, sold homes, pawned furniture, even borrowed money to buy railway stock. "Everyone is getting rich," wrote one newspaper. To refuse to invest is to admit stupidity. The newspapers, of course, had their own stake in the game. They printed advertisements, glowing reports, and exclusive tips, many paid for by the companies themselves. For a brief moment, it felt like a new dawn. Trains roared through the countryside, carrying passengers who marveled at the speed, 30 miles per hour. Cities felt closer, commerce faster, life itself seemed to be accelerating. But beneath the noise of engines and excitement, cracks began to appear. Many of the new railway companies had raised vast sums of money, yet their projects were nothing but lines on a map. They hadn't even begun construction. Others had routes planned through impossible terrain, across mountains, rivers, and private estates that would never give permission. Costs ballooned. Engineers demanded higher pay. Iron and coal prices soared. And the government, alarmed by the chaos, began to tighten control.
Sell the railway shares now!
We're too late. It's all worthless.
We are ruined.
Then came the turning point. In 1846, Parliament approved only a fraction of the proposed lines. Suddenly, investors realized not every railway would be built. Many of their dreams were quite literally going nowhere. Confidence shattered. Within months, share prices began to collapse. Fortunes evaporated overnight. Men who once boasted of wealth were ruined. Taverns that had buzzed with talk of opportunity now filled with silence and despair. George Hudson, the railway king himself, fell from grace. His empire was exposed as a house of cards, built on inflated profits, false accounting, and borrowed money. Once praised as a visionary, he became the face of deceit. Crowds that once cheered his name now jeered it. Across Britain, bankruptcy courts overflowed. Families lost everything. Servants who had dreamed of wealth returned to their masters. Towns that had hoped for new stations were left with nothing but empty fields and unpaid debts. The mania was over. By 1850, the railway bubble had burst entirely. Of the thousands of miles proposed, only a fraction was ever completed. The rest existed as ruins of ink and ambition. The great railway dream had turned into one of the greatest financial disasters in British history. But here's where the story takes its strange twist. Unlike many bubbles, this one left behind something tangible. Though investors lost their money, Britain gained something far more valuable: infrastructure. The railways that were built became the foundation of modern transportation, connecting cities and fueling trade for centuries to come. Out of greed came progress. Out of ruin came resilience. By the 1860s, trains were carrying millions of passengers and tons of goods, reshaping the economy and culture of a nation. The scars of the mania remained, but the iron veins that once bankrupted the foolish became the lifelines of an empire. It's easy to mock the investors of the 1840s, to call them fools or dreamers. But the truth is, they were visionaries in their own way. They believed in a faster, more connected world. They just believed too much, too soon. The railway mania was more than a financial crash. It was a mirror reflecting human nature itself, the desire to chase progress, the fear of being left behind, the illusion that wealth can be built without consequence. It wasn't the first mania in history, and it wouldn't be the last, but it remains one of the most vivid, a story of ambition, arrogance, and unintended legacy. Today, every time a train whistle echoes through the countryside, it carries a faint whisper from that age, of investors clutching their dreams in trembling hands, of rails drawn on parchment and fortunes lost in smoke. Because in the end, progress has always ridden on the same tracks as greed. You've been watching Wealth Untold, where every track of history leads somewhere, but not always where we expect. From the ashes of speculation, an empire of steel was born. And the next time you hear the rumble of a train, remember, sometimes, the cost of connection is everything that once held us apart.